Good morning, everybody. It's good to be back in person, even if it is at 9 a.m. Yeah. Worked out, I had an 8 a.m., right down the street, so it's good. I got my first cup of coffee up in the City Commission Chambers office, so it's good. We'll do quick introductions, and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. So I'm Charlie Johnson, President and CEO of Visit Fargo-Moorhead.
Mallory Ackerman, Director of Convention Sales at Visit Fargo-Moorhead.
Emma McIntyre, Manager of Development at Folkways.
Kate Falstead, Events and Marketing Specialist, Southeast Education Cooperative.
Kent Kolstedt, President, Livewire.
Michelle Turnberg, Fargo City Commission.
Susan Thompson, City of Fargo Finance.
Mike Rethinger, City Administrator, Fargo.
Taylor Snelling, owner of Mezzaluna.
Dave Hepcorn, Fargo City Commission.
Jim Gilmore, Fargo staff.
Claire Hughes, GM of the Clubhouse Hotel and Suites.
And do we have someone online?
Yeah, Eric Johnson here, Assistant City Attorney.
Anyone else? Okay, thanks, Eric. Okay, so we're going to talk today about our RFP criteria and the required minimum discussion. I sort of see this as a three-step thing. Hopefully, we'll at least get near step 3 today. You printed that, and everyone has those? I emailed them out yesterday.
No, I don't have copies. I only have the agendas. So if you have copies of them, go for it.
I can run up and get some.
Okay, sorry about that.
Can I make one joke while so there was a time delay in our last meeting because you guys were both online, and the mayor actually requested that because at the city commission meetings, we use a lot of bad language, and so to have a time delay would be a good thing. So that was my joke that we did last week.
Yeah, actually, I after the meeting, I told Mallory, I said, I think that went way better than it deserved to. With, trying to run a meeting from that far away. Once we got the audio figured out, it was fine. Yeah.
It got figured out on your end. It didn't get figured out on our end. There was still an echo through the whole meeting.
Yeah, well, I'm doing this a lot in here because of the slapback, so. So while he's getting those, the three-step process I see is, I think we've narrowed down what we want in these lists. I changed a little bit after the last meeting. We'll go over that quickly, I hope, and can resolve a couple things there. And then, I need to find the one I put my notes on. And then I think we need to decide, we'll come back to the minimums, but we need to decide how much weight each of these 4 categories gets by itself. That's one way to look at it. So are they all worth 25%? I'm not saying they're not, but we can have a little discussion about that. Maybe something's worth, a couple of them are worth 30 and others are worth 20. I don't know. We're going to have a discussion about that. And then we'll talk a little bit about Jim's, pretty simple to understand 1 to 5 rating scale for weighting, and then decide how we want to apply that to these things. I suppose I could add a 4th step and do the minimums first, right? Make sure we're all in agreement on that, because we talked about that quite a bit in the last couple meetings.
Yeah, my only comment would be that these items will be weighted, but I would call this grading, because we're not really weighting them, we're
Right.
grading them,
Yeah.
so that we keep those numbers separate, because they're both 1 through 5. I just didn't want that to get confused.
Yeah, that makes more sense. Grading, okay. It says rating on the top, but we'll call it grading, okay? But then we should go like A through D, right? And F? No, I'm kidding. Sorry, okay. Been a long time. That'd be traumatic for me anyway, to remind me of my school days. Okay, so let's take a quick look at those minimums again, since we're waiting for Jim to bring down copies of the rest of the stuff. One of the requirements, the number 1 requirement, we think, is to have an attached hotel with 150 to 200 guest rooms, full service preferred. Anybody disagree or have any comments on that? After last week, we changed the ballroom and exhibit hall into one line and combined the square footage. So we did ballroom/exhibit hall 50,000 square feet, dividable by soundproof air walls. Just to make it clear that we're open to however they want to configure it. We'll listen to whatever comes from people. For a minimum on the kitchen side, I see Dan Herder's here. This might be less than he thought it should be, but I think we're looking realistically at what kind of square footage we can afford in the building. So we talked last week a little bit about having a minimum requirement of 6,000 square feet for a kitchen, hoping it could be a little bigger. Okay. Additional meeting rooms, minimum of about 8,800 square feet, preferably 10 to 12, but, you know, again, we're trying to be realistic, so we need to set minimums in here. And then in the comments on that, and perhaps somewhere in the document, we can say additional space at the hotel is requested, but not required. But I also think we could make it clear that at some point it could be a mix and match kind of thing. As we learned, for instance, at Fox Cities, they have a big room, they built the big exhibit hall, which also serves as a ballroom sometimes, and then they have all of the other meeting space in the hotel, which had already existed. So we just have to find a way in the language to convey that, I think. Loading docks, we were listening to Kent on this. Any other comments on those ones? I don't mean to rush through this. We can always go back if you want to. Loading docks. Make sure I understood what you were saying here. Mallory helped me with this. You need one dock at ground level with a 15-foot high door, because some people don't bring trucks, they bring cars or pickup trucks, whatever, things that don't load up at the dock side. And then 2 docks with a 13-foot height. So basically, how many feet up do they have to be for a truck?
I should know that minimum, but I want to say it's about 4.5, 5 feet.
Yeah, I was going to say 4 to 5 feet.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Okay, well, we'll figure that out. That's more detail than we need here probably, but at truck height. And then I also, in the comments, and hopefully we can put this in here, preferably with ease of access through the back of house into the exhibit hall. I didn't put any language in there about airlock or how we want, you know, a door and then a door. I don't know if we need or can convey that in this first phase of the RFP. It could become a secondary thing. What do you think?
I think that could be a secondary piece later in
Okay.
the process. And just to point out for the group too, just to call it out, this is a universal, you know, situation, not just a production, not just for Expo. It's for vendors as well, right? You know, I'm thinking food service vendors, anything along those lines. You know, if we have an outside company that's maybe handling linens for the hotel, they'll need access to a dock as well. You know, that.
Right.
So this will work nicely, I think.
Okay. How are we doing so far on that? We got some notes from Kent and also from Joe, who couldn't be here today. Are we? I'm following up. Okay. Anything that we need to add there? Okay. Power access, 200 amp minimum is what you asked for, minimum. Floor access primary, but of course you need some overhead access. And you said preferably every 20 feet in the floor, right?
Correct. Yeah. The every 20 feet piece is for trade show usage primarily, right? So if you have different vendors, you know, coming with 10 by 10 booths, that type of setup, that'll make things nice and easy and clean. We're not running cables across the carpet or across the floor, excuse me, that type of thing, or creating trip hazards.
If you have back-to-back 20-foot booths, you can share or reach with an extension cord.
Yep, exactly. And just to call out too, overhead power is not really a need, right? Companies like ours can run cabling up to the ceiling as needed and tie that in as needed. So there wouldn't be a need for overhead. So everything can be either on wall or on the floor for the trade show purpose. So nice and easy.
Okay. Okay, then we got down to storage. We talked about a minimum of 10,000 square feet. I think this is kind of vital to have at least that much storage.
Okay, so from Joe's notes, he also said that it is important to have it all on one level.
Yeah.
So it's easy to utilize. So it's all storage in back of house. I think this also depends on what we need for chairs, tables, and even like the kitchen storage, depending if this is going to be a full service kitchen, like where do we put the chafers and all of those extra things. So it's kind of dependent on how the rest of the space is set up.
And just to piggyback on that, part of this is about how quickly do we want to turn over events in the venue too. You know, certainly we could have a mezzanine level with storage, something to that effect like we saw in St. Cloud, and it would probably do the job for the sake of the space to store the equipment. But it takes that much more time to move that equipment up and down in a frail elevator. It takes more time to turn over the venue than in that case. So ideally that storage is all in one space, all accessible from back of house, quick, easy turnovers in that way.
Okay. Pre-function. I got a question mark by this one. I can't remember what HVS said in there. Does anybody remember what they said? That was more than I thought it would be, I think they were like in the 24,000 square foot range, 20 plus.
Was it a percentage of what the total ballroom space was?
Depended on it?
I think there might have been a percentage in there too.
Oh, okay.
So whatever that number ends up being, it'd be a percentage of
Do you
that.
do you
But
remember the percentage?
no, I sure don't. No, I sure don't.
I probably have that in here, but it would take me half an hour to dig it out, so that's not going to serve us. So, I don't know, it seems to me, Mallory, you're more of an event planner, you're a hotel person. Feel like 10,000 square feet should be enough for most things.
If we think of it as a minimum, that's
Yeah.
probably a decent enough number to start.
Agreed. Couple other things from, again, Joe's notes here. He said something about not using escalators, but we would need to have some sort of requirement for elevator banks if we do utilize the second floor, and commercial elevator as well, or that back of house lift so that we can get to materials on the second floor. And then secondly, all meeting rooms should have built-in AV capabilities to support meetings, but ballroom exhibit space should be the responsibility of the event bringing in to fit their needs. Does that make sense, Kent? Yeah.
It does, yeah. Breakout space, basic meeting room space, that type of thing could very easily have built-in basic AV, like projection, simple audio system, that type of thing, to keep things accessible. So,
Talking about the breakout rooms now?
correct.
Yeah, okay. We could make a line about that. That almost seems like, duh, I mean, that's, anybody who's going to produce a meeting room is going to know that it needs to have appropriate AV. So it just depends on how much detail we want to get into in this first phase of minimums. So,
Charlie.
yes.
Hi, Joe.
Hey,
Joe
you're here.
Sorry.
All right, welcome.
Yeah, I was in a different world, I think, trying to get into this meeting, but figured it out. When I popped on, I heard Mallory. I heard my name right away, so I don't know if there was questions or anything the group was asking of me. It sounds like you were maybe going through my list of items.
Yes, she was. Yes.
Okay.
All good things,
Okay.
Joe. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's fine. I think one of the things I was listening to was kind of that AV, and I think you're right, Charlie, obviously in the meeting rooms. The only reason I brought it up was I think we learned about some of those locations not using in the ballrooms, some of the things that were put in and probably weren't used. Maybe Kent, you could speak to that, or you already did.
Yeah, happy to briefly clarify that. So it was Rochester particularly where we saw in the ballroom space where there's really substantial and very, very expensive technology throughout that space that's not always utilized and doesn't allow for a lot of reconfiguration of the space. So holds event planners fairly tight in terms of how they can configure the space if they do want to use in-house technology, and has posed a pretty substantial maintenance cost to the convention center in Rochester in that way. So they do have breakout space that has installed AV, simple projection, simple audio system, that type of thing, which again, I think the group is landing on. That makes sense for breakout space, meeting room space, but for the ballroom itself, I think we can forego that and allow each event planner to bring in AV as needed.
So do you think there should be some sort of at least rudimentary built-in space in a ballroom and exhibit hall?
In the ballroom and exhibit hall, I mean, maybe a basic audio system for overhead announcements, like a session is starting in 5 minutes type of thing. I don't think you need anything more than that in a ballroom space.
Again, that's a detail we would probably get to in the second phase. Okay. Commissioner.
Can I ask a question that it might be out of order? So the attached hotel, so the RFP, to me, we don't want to exclude any of these proposals. And even if they don't have it in the original plan, if they had that in part of the proposal, could that be included? I guess that's the question maybe for Jim, that when we put out the RFP, we want that included, but does that have to be initially? And that's a question for Charlie too.
Which part are you talking about now? The AV stuff?
No. So at the very top of our requirements, it's an attached hotel, 150 to 200 rooms. And so my question is, the convention space, does that have to be an initial thing right away, or can that be part of the plan? I don't know if that makes sense, but do you get what I'm saying? Are we going to require that to be the be done at the exact same time? Go,
Well, I think in the overall proposal, we want to see these minimums. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
but I mean, right away, I guess that's the thing. Is that going to have to be part of the whole plan immediately, or can that be part of the plan as time goes by? I guess that's my question.
Are you saying, does the hotel need to be built immediately, or can that be down the road, right?
No, so I guess my question is, so the RFP, when it, to me, that's a big hurt, that's a lot. And so that's, it's more because Charlie, it's your vision. And so is that what you see? No, that's.
I'm comfortable with these items being included as requirements because I don't think you want a facility without the things on the left-hand side. And then the minimum, you know, the second column, you know, I think we're being pretty considerate in making them, you know, minimums, right? Or, I mean, we could make some of them smaller, I said, you know, but I don't think we want to get ourselves, we don't want to build something that's going to start out being difficult to use. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So then, if you don't mind, so Jim, I guess then my question to you is, do you think that will be a hindrance to the RFPs if that, because I do, so to summarize what Charlie said, that is part of the project. It's very important. But my question is, does it all have to be right then, all at the same time, being constructed at the same time? That's
okay. That's a fair question for Jim.
That's really a question for the city commission. I mean, do you want to leave it so open that someone could give you a proposal where it starts out with a 100-room hotel, but then it's going to be more added on, and we're going to put meeting space in a future phase, or a restaurant a future phase? I mean, so you can leave it open. That may allow you to get more proposals, but, you know, do you really want a convention center if you're not going to have a, you know, hotel? I mean, when we built parking ramps downtown, we insisted that there be apartments right behind it. We didn't want a, you know, single thing, but it's really up to the city commission and this
Charlie.
committee to make a recommendation on that.
Yeah.
If a hotel open at the same time the convention center is a must, then that you should put that in the RFP. If you're open to waiting, then that could be an option in the RFP. I mean, I'll write it either way. It's up to the committee to.
Yeah. Joe, you have something?
Well, I mean, we're establishing the basic requirements, right? So it feels to me like if this research says the hotel has to be 150, then it has to be at least 150. I mean, I would assume that's our job to say you have to meet these basic requirements. And maybe, Dave, what you're asking is could they have a plan for getting to those over time after the start? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, that's, and I guess my main thing, so it's kind of ironic. Jim says, well, ask the city commission. Well, duh. So, but what I want to do is make sure that we are following what the concept is. And if that's a critical thing, but my main thing is I want us to have as many RFP proposals as possible. So that's my main thing. But if they could still accomplish that with, I guess that's my question. And this might be something we need to think about for a while, and it might be something for all of us to think about. But because I do think that this requirement of the hotel, that's a heavy lift, just that all by itself. Do you know what I mean?
Well, we're thinking about it now, so it's okay. We should be talking about this for sure. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I think if we're wanting to have it as broad as possible so that we aren't missing out on opportunities, I understand that, but we also have to set our minimums to some degree, so we at least have what we're asking for. Because if we just say like, well, you can add 75 more rooms later on, we're setting ourselves up for, you know, not what we're looking for. Does that make sense?
If I can, real quick, just 2 cents on this. I mean, I absolutely agree. Let's get as many possible proposals as we can on this, as many opportunities as we can to look at. Thing that jumps out at me is that the variables that could creep into play over time, right? You might have somebody that promises, oh yeah, within 2 years we'll get this 150 hotel built, so on and so forth. And then, some new variable pops up, that developer goes under or they merge with somebody and now that's by the wayside. I think it might put us at a disadvantage. If we're talking about this really great, set of facilities that we're building out here, marketing that, trying to pull in events, so on and so forth, having the attached hotel or nearby hotel, however we're configuring that and stating that, I think is a really big selling point. So,
Perhaps one recommendation I could make that might make you feel better. We could, instead of saying minimum, we could say recommended minimums, which would leave them a little grace space there. Would that make, yeah? That's a small thing, but it kind of implies that, maybe we cut back here to make this one kind of thing. I don't want to cut anybody off. I agree with that 100%.
Is part of the question what's required for phase one of the RFPs? So is what's going to be vetted through phase two?
Yes.
So phase one would be, maybe I have it cited and it can accommodate up to 150 rooms. I haven't actually picked what brand of hotel or whatever, but that's going to be there. And then when we set the parameters for phase two, that's where it gets more specific on how many rooms, who's your hotel partner, all of that.
So just to summarize, it's critical to have this as part of the project. That's the key. But I just want to not inhibit all the RFPs by saying that has to be out of the box, that has to be completed at the exact same time. And maybe I'm making it too complicated, but I also want to make sure we're following the intention of what's the important thing. And clearly having an attached hotel is an important thing, critical to the success.
Yeah.
Oh, it has to have a hotel. It's a public-private partnership. That's the way it's designed. That's the way I see it. And that's what we sold it as, I think, to the public. It's a public-private partnership. The most obvious private part of the partnership is the hotel, whether it's an existing one and they add other amenities or if they build a hotel next to it. I don't know how we leave that out, if that's what you're asking. And I think everyone has told us we're probably on the low side of what all of our friends around the country have told us for number of hotel rooms. But I think we're okay with that as a minimum.
One more, and then I promise I'll quit. It seems like.
I'm wishing I could see thought balloons of the developers that are in there. Could you pop those up for me, you guys? And the ones who are listening on TV.
But for Jim, the city, we've done this. So do you think, is there some way, like Susan talked about in the first grouping, then when it gets to the second grouping, it gets more refined? Is there some way we can, I don't know if that makes sense.
Someone could submit a proposal and not have all the details of the hotel worked out that could then get worked out in the second phase. Maybe they don't know what flag it's going to be at, or they're using a range, and it's that part of the financing might not be all pulled together, but you might really like that site and move it on to one of the finalists. There could be some missing thing where they don't know exactly who's going to operate the hotel, but they've got the basic design. And so, but certainly by the time you get to the second phase, you're going to want to have answers to that. And before we actually sign a contract, we're going to want to know every last detail of what's in that proposal.
And I think the first round, however we set this, and I'm pretty comfortable with this, especially, and I'm okay with adding recommended minimums because then, leaves a little leeway for people. Yeah. I sort of feel like the developers are going to tell us if we're way out of line. And if, they're going to come in with what they come in with and say, with the money you're offering, you can build this. If you had $10 more million, you could build this. I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that, So I think the first phase is to gauge the initial interest, get locations, but also we need to emphasize the fact that the private part of this is to have a hotel beside it. Yeah.
And the other thing, what you just said there, then the other thing is the potential of a pilot or a TIF or something like that. That's where that possibly could come into play. So that's, I don't know if that makes sense, but, and I apologize, but I do think it's, and maybe I put this in at the wrong time, but I just think it's a discussion and it's something that we should think about because it's, to me, that it's a big that's a big, it's going to cost a lot of money to build that size hotel regardless. And so anyway, so thank you.
Yeah, and I think that, but that's a secondary thing, and I think we actually have that, we'll get to that in the criteria, that one of the lines is need for additional help from the city for the private part of it. So,
Just one other comment. I want to remind everyone in this process, we're going to have, when the RFP comes out, we're going to have probably 30 days for developers to ask us questions. So if there's something unclear, or we want to make an adjustment to the RFP, you could do so at that time, kind of, part of the way, or early in the process.
right, yeah, there would be room for that, and before they actually have to submit it, so. I don't, yeah, I'm with you, I think, in that we don't want to turn anybody away. We want to see what the proposals are, and we've all agreed that in the second phase, you get down to nitty gritty of negotiating some things. What are you going to give up? What are you going to put here? Do you need a TIF? Blah, blah, blah. But I'm pretty comfortable with these as recommended minimums. Not that I'm trying to move the conversation along, but I am. If we're good with that for now. Okay, and we can take the question mark off the pre-function. Joe, anything you want to add? I don't want to miss out on you because I can't see your face, so.
Nor do you want to, Charlie.
Yeah. I wasn't going to add that, but okay.
Yeah, I could read your little balloon. I would just say that Jim's comments and the comments that are being made about, this is a first round. For me personally, I don't want to see 15. What's changed since we've started this with the belief that we're not having the interest of a lot of developers wanting to look at this, and that Q&A that will start after the first round goes out is going to tell us a lot. So making assumptions on some of those things probably aren't going to be helpful for us, other than to set the bare minimums, which it's your industry, you guys know it, and I think you've been really helpful getting us to where we are right now. So it's kind of just let the process work forward.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Okay.
As far as the minimums go on a timeline for decision making, do we have like a date that we want to have these set by? So if we're coming back with additional feedback, we know in the next 2 meetings, the next 3 meetings? Or is it?
You want me to tell you what I think?
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like we've decided on these.
Yeah.
For the first round on the
Okay.
minimums. And now we're going to move into the criteria. And then it'll take us this meeting and at least next meeting
Okay.
to finish that and the grading and how much weight we're going to give each section. And then I still don't think it's unreasonable to think we could be done with this by early June. Jim, I'm looking at you. With our part of the work anyway.
I mean, I think we can get this to the city commission in June. I'm not trying to write a 40-page RFP. It's going to be about 5 pages. Really, it's written. We just need to plug in these criteria and probably the couple questions that have come up. The biggest is, what's the dollar amount? What's our budget?
Right.
And I think, we're going to be at 37.5, or we're going to be at 38. And then one of the other comments we were talking about internally, I've always felt like there should just be like 3 finalists, try to really narrow it down. But I think some others have thought, well, maybe it should be up to 5. If you get too many, then people won't be serious about putting together a really good proposal for that second phase.
Yeah, in my vision, as you would call it, I see maybe 3 finalists out of however many. I don't know. I'm just guessing somewhere between 5 and 8 proposals. I might be wrong after this goes out. Maybe it'll only be 3. I don't know. But I think. Are you okay with what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just curious what the process is if things pop up later on, if it's appropriate to bring them up, or if we're kind of where we've decided. If we're including minimums, is it also appropriate for us to include like ideals based on the research that we've done, or just providing as much context to developers as possible?
You mean like a range? This would be super great. Like if it was 200,000 square feet.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that would. I think we know how much money we have, and I think that's probably for a second phase expansion down the road. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be helpful for context.
Yeah, we need to. I think we need to be realistic. Developers don't want us, throwing something at them that's. You can't do that. I mean, we know. I think we know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
just something for consideration to add
Yeah.
in step 2 is just.
Regarding the number to advance, I'm sorry. Regarding the number to advance, I think I would suggest we word it as up to 3, or up to 5, perhaps. That way, you know, if there's some really good 4 and 5s, it gives you the opportunity. The developers know the amount of work that's going to go into phase 2, so if they are not interested, that'll, you know, deter them. But I think leaving it a little more broad would be helpful.
Well, yeah, and when I said 3, I'm just pulling that off the top of my head. The committee will get to decide, which includes the city commission. Maybe there are 4 or 5 that we do want to ask questions and come back for a second round. I'm not saying no to that. Just seems like, we'll see.
But that won't be part of the RFP saying we are limiting it to, right?
Yeah, we're not, no,
Okay.
this first phase, we're not telling them who, I don't think we need to say what we're going to narrow it down to.
Okay.
But they need to know it's going to be a 2-phase process and that it will be narrowed down. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about the criteria, the 4 boxes here. The boxes are called site considerations, conceptual plan, urban considerations, and the development team. Let's start at the bottom with the development team. And I think Joe has a comment on this. You sent a note about that one, right, Joe?
I'm sure I did. I don't have my note in front of me, Charlie.
Well, I have them. I'll tell you what you said. Okay.
Let's see.
So we've got on that list, in that box, we have overall concept, experience of the developer, experience of the design team, experience of the construction manager contractors, experience of the hotel restaurant operator, experience of the convention center operator, if different than the hotel, ability to finance the project. You suggested that if you pick the right developer, they're bound to pick the best design team, concept, construction team. So I take that to mean you're wondering if we need those next 3 after experience of the developer. Could you elaborate on that now that you remember what it was?
That's exactly it. Just for the committee's consideration seems like the key partner is the developer, and they're obviously working with their design team and construction and others, unless that process is handled differently than what I'm thinking. So that seems to drive, for me, the relationship with that developer seems to be pretty critical.
Comments from the rest of you on that? I kind of see what Joe's saying. I mean, if to make us feel better, we could do what I did with some of these others and say experience of the developer / design team construction group and make it all one thing. And, you know, give it some extra points probably.
Maybe I've got kind of a broader question as I look at these. Do we want to first have some discussion? You know, should site considerations be 40% of the overall in terms of the
Okay, yep,
categories first and then
sure.
down the rest?
Okay, yeah, you're right. That's kind of the way I said we were going to do it, wasn't it? Okay, I forgot. All right. Okay, so the 4 boxes are, like I said, site, conceptual plan, urban consideration, development team. Site considerations, let's start and say they're 25% each.
More or less.
Tell me what I'm wrong, where I'm wrong. Does anybody have any, you know, you could just do that and go from there. But the question is that fair? Should something else get more points? Should something be 30, 30, 20, 20, you know, or 25, 25? No, 20, 20.
I mean, I think in the first phase, this is going to be probably one of the most important. Where is the site and how is it going to work? So it's probably more than a quarter, but I don't know what percent to put on it. But, you know, it's because the conceptual plan is probably more important in the second phase. That's when you're really getting into the details. So my thought.
I'm waiting for other opinions.
Can you restate the percentage that you said, Charlie?
Say it again.
Can you restate the percentage that you had initially stated?
Well, there's 4 boxes, so I'm starting at 25, 25, 25. Yeah. So the question is, yeah, it's hard to hear here. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I ask people to repeat themselves too. It's okay. And we're so close, you know, it's like, yeah. So the question is, do we want to give 30% to something or 40% to something? Tell me what you think. Jim seems to think the site consideration might be more important right off the bat.
Absolutely, I would agree personally.
I would agree
I would
also.
also agree. You can't move it, so that site that's not something that can be
Yeah,
changed.
that's true, that's true. Yeah, yeah. And then you come into, possibility for expansion comes in there. So, yeah. Okay, so if we start with a base of 25% each, but we think that one is more important, how significantly more important is it? Do you want to start at 40% for that? 35%? Michael?
I concur with the comments that have been shared. I think you could start at 40% with that site concept. And I think after that, you will, I've kind of corrected myself because I was initially thinking that you're going to want to see the financial depth and the security and the ability of the development team to deliver, but you can pick that up in phase 2, and I think that's okay. But I think if you started at 40% there, I would also move up from the bottom box, the overall concept, which is currently embedded within the development team. I would move that up to the top criteria, add that to site, and then you're at 40%. And then I think if you can try to keep it as equal as you could with the others, knowing that in the second phase, you're putting everybody on notice that we're going to do a very deep dive into financial health, strength, stress test, and other projects and experiences of the teams.
Okay, I'll make sure I heard you right. Did you say, and I think I kind of agree with you if I heard you correctly, in the urban considerations, the overall concept thing actually should go up as part of the conceptual plan?
Yeah,
Move
I
it
had
into that category?
I had the overall concept, which is currently in the development team, box 4, moving up to site considerations. So you kind of get a more global picture first of site and the interaction of the project to site, location of site, and then you can get into the experiences in a more detail and depth with who makes the short list to the second invitation, their financial health, strength, experiences, other examples of project work that they've done elsewhere.
Okay, so taking that one line, moving that up, that makes sense to me, and I'm embarrassed that I didn't notice it before. Anybody have any disagreement with that? That makes perfect sense to me. Okay, we're taking overall concept, the first line of the development team out, and just leaving the development team down there, and moving that up on top of the conceptual plan. Okay. Okay, so now, overall concept. So we have 60% left. How do you want to divide it up? 20-20-20, or is the conceptual plan worth more?
Charlie, I was not aware that there was going to be a math involved in all this, and this is very, what I'm getting nervous about is when you say that it's, 40% for the site, it's going to add up to being 300%. So that's what I'm
We will
nervous.
not allow that to happen, don't worry. Someone here has a calculator. We all have them on our phones. Well, and these are, we can go back and adjust. We could do like 38%. So what do you think? Overall concept, see, I feel like it's worth more than 20%.
I do think a lot of the conceptual plan will tie into phase 2 as well. So I don't know if it needs to be weighted as heavily based on the fact that there will be more research done, or like it dives deeper in on phase 2, and we have minimums associated with a lot of these aspects.
Comments? Somebody throw out a number.
I like where you landed on, and I don't want to, excuse me, I don't want to, discount where we landed on 40% for the first one, but I kind of like the 30-30-20-20 that was discussed on the front end of this. You pitched that as part of your bringing this up. Yeah, just throwing that out there. It seems like these top two things give us the big picture of what we're looking at here, and doesn't necessarily reduce the value. Well, it doesn't reduce value by number, I suppose, but it doesn't discount the importance of urban and development. So
Okay, so we have a 30-30-20-20 proposal on the floor. What do you guys think of that? I think that's fair.
Okay, I have slightly different numbers. However, for time's sake, would it be helpful if we just all shared what our numbers are and take an average? And then have a conversation of how things are weighted? Because otherwise, we're just going to be going back and forth on. Yes, it's very time consuming to do it this way. So like I would say 35, 25, 15, 25. Like that's my personal opinion. But you know, as we're throwing out numbers, like I think it's much more efficient to take an average of what everyone thinks and then go from there. Anybody disagree?
I think that sounds pretty good.
Thank you.
I mean, what you said for percentages. Is there
Okay.
any disagreement on that?
I would agree with your process, and maybe an alternative for now is to discuss each section so we can devise an opinion on how we would weight it.
So you want everyone to tell you what they think and then we're going to average it out? Is that what you're suggesting?
That is what I'm suggesting, but after this meeting and then discuss it again on next week.
Oh, okay.
Like what, to Emma's point, like discuss the things, come up with your 4 percentages. And then if we take a quick poll between now and next Friday, then we can at least have the baseline of what the average of our group thinks.
Mallory, Joe.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, hearing this, it feels like the site and the developers seem to be pretty important on this first phase, and the urban considerations seem to be the least. Not because any of these are not valuable, but some things like compatible with city plans and zoning. I mean, if that's not the case at the end of the day, that's going to be a bigger issue. So, you know, my suggestion is if we feel the site and the developer are the 2 highest criteria, then whatever we end up at the end of the day, percentage-wise, this should be the higher percentages for certain.
Yep, I agree. And I feel like if we're all in agreement in that will show in the numbers. But Kent also said that site and conception should be higher than urban consideration and development. So that's a little skewed.
I'm inclined to think the conceptual plan is more important than the development team because I don't think we're going to really get any substandard development teams. And if we do, it'll be pretty easy to weed them out. Okay, yeah, okay.
I think too, if you're investing in a business, oftentimes in like startup space, you invest in the team that's doing the work. So I would probably weigh it heavier in that regard. I do wonder, and a question for the crowd, is the urban considerations. A lot of those I perceive to be site considerations that would potentially fit in that category. I'm trying to recall the conversation that we had that pulled them out of site considerations. But they seem to be, I mean, compatible with city plans and zoning. Seems like something that could fit within a site consideration. I don't know if it deserves its own category, but just something that I'm noodling on.
Yeah, actually, I was just thinking that same thing, that category 3 almost could be part of the conceptual plan.
She just said site.
Site, of the site plan. Oh, yeah.
Of the site
That's right.
considerations.
You're correct, yes. Mhm.
So does
So
that
then
then
we'd
narrow
break
it
us-
down to 3
We want to
groups?
break us down to 3 categories.
Okay.
Didn't we also talk about the City of Fargo financial impact as one of these criteria? And I don't see it on here, and I can't remember where we put it, but in my mind, it kind of goes with, maybe rather than call it the development team, call it the development process, and it puts some financial implications down in that weighting as well. Like it's going to depend on what partnerships are proposed as far as ownership and that sort of thing, that will have an impact on the city of Fargo. And I think we need to consider that as part of this initial conversation.
I need to know more of what you're saying about that. I don't,
Well, I think we need to think about what's the bottom line to the city of Fargo? Like what are these proposals going to be? The proposal comes in and says, like the one that was at Wisconsin that took all the risk, hey, have at it. But if it's, we want to manage it, we want to own it, we want, all the revenues, but hey, you can put the capital in there That's not going to fly. So I think there needs to be some criteria in here that, rather than calling it a development team, call it the management proposal or something, and then put a line in here that says, financial considerations to the city of Fargo.
Or partnership model. Yeah, something that's just trying to get a little bit more of an insight into how they're thinking about the place, not only at construction, but at the time of operation. Are you expecting a subsidy from the city of Fargo? Are you able to stand on your own? And kind of what's your, and again, we'll get into greater detail on the round 2 of the financial analysis, but we really should know on the front end if they are expecting there to be some kind of deep subsidy or partnership with city that would require the general fund or the taxpayer to come to the table as well to help co-operate a facility.
I guess that's a question. So is this something that we'll have an outside party evaluate this, Jim, kind of like we do?
Yeah, I think in this first phase, they're not going to have all that information. And if they do, it's just kind of pulling numbers from the air. I think that's the second phase where you're going to find out, how is it actually going to operate? The city, through its, the work that Susan's done with Baker Tilly, is kind of have the financial model where they're kind of setting aside, well, we think we might lose $300,000 a year. We're putting aside this amount of money for capital. And so we're kind of protecting ourselves already, at least in this first phase. When we get into the second phase, exactly how you're going to share the food revenue and all of that's going to be real important. But, if we're just giving people 2 to 3 months to put this together, that's all just kind of make believe. They're not going to really have enough time, or most people won't have enough time. And we're not going to be able to really evaluate it unless we take a long time. I think the second phase, that's where you're going to get into, okay, how, what's the rent on the rooms? Let's see your entire detailed pro forma on how this is going to work. Otherwise, if you want all that information, this is more of we need to give people a price 6-7 months to put together a proposal.
I fully agree that there needs to be much more thorough analysis. That needs to be a huge part of phase 2. I'm just suggesting that by putting some sort of notice in there, we're telling them this is going to be an issue for us. With where's the city of Fargo going to be as a partner in this? Are there revenue opportunities, or is it going to be the expectation of just a subsidy? I'm not saying it needs to be a huge weight, but I do think we need to put that in here to start, that it matters.
Well, I think I like the idea of slipping somewhere in there a management model as part of the criteria. And I would probably put it up here with or instead of the line for need for incentives from the city.
Well, could it go with development team as well? I mean, it's kind of like the overall management and operation of it.
Yeah,
It could go
it
down
could be
to the
there too.
bottom with development team as
Okay.
your general management model.
Okay.
So I guess that's my question. Like we had an outside group give us ideas for the convention center space and all that. Is that something that they and Baker Tilly would help us with that? Because I mean, for all of us, that is not our, other than some, but to help us with the expertise of the financial model.
Yeah, we could talk to Baker Tilly. We could probably get some advice from HVS on that too.
I think you'd probably want HVS to look at, the detailed conceptual plan, does this flow right, the number of rooms, meeting rooms and all of that, and how they've structured their pro forma. And Baker Tilly, I think, and I don't know if they could do that also, Susan, but Baker Tilly or PFM, we've used groups like that to get into the financials of the developer to say, okay, do they have the cash? Is this ready to go? Do they have investors, real investors with real money that can build this hotel? Because, that we need to see that. That's what we've done on our other projects like Block 9 and the parking ramps. They've delved into that. And actually, the city doesn't always see that data, but our financial reviewer does get into their finances.
Okay, but back to the question, if we put in management proposal just as, just a generic term for that, at least they'd know that we'd want to know what their idea was. It's not necessarily, none of this is set in stone the first time, right? Would that be okay? Make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think to Jim's point about the next phase, I think it probably will involve two different sets of professionals. One, HVS can look at the operation plan and say, you know, yes, this is realistic, or probably you're not going to get 4 national conferences in a year. That's not realistic. Whereas a PFM or a Baker Tilly can look at the overall financial plan. I'm, you know, assuming if there's incentives put in or things like that. I put them on notice. I contracted them to do this first phase and said there'll probably be a second phase paid by someone other than the city for that. So, yes.
But just like we were talking about, that might not, that's the second round. Once we get to 3 finalists or 5 or whatever, that's when you get more specific about all that, I think.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Okay, we got like 9 minutes left, so I know you want to wait till next time, but here, can we agree on this? Are we going to go down to 3 categories? Are we okay moving the urban considerations up, making that part of the site considerations, because it all kind of belongs there? So we just basically eliminate that category and combine it with the site considerations. And then we're going to take the overall concept and move that up into that second one. So then we have, and then the experience of the developer, we're going to collapse a couple of those things as Joe suggested. We'll add partnership/management model into the site considerations. So we're going to cut down to 3 categories, which would change the way you would divvy up the percentages. So do you agree with Mallory that you would like to wait until next week to add the percentages to these?
It's good to know what our homework is. Heck yeah.
What's that?
I said it's helpful to know homework, so that gives like I think a week is a good amount of time to sit down and do some math.
Okay, so we'll.
Plus the don't.
Charlie,
Yeah, Joe.
Charlie, are you asking for the broad percentages by category? So
Yes,
like
yes,
40,
but
30,
we're down to 3 categories.
Right. So, I mean, can we take 2 minutes? It seems like the conversations, from what I'm hearing, is site selection still pretty high. It's probably 40, and the other 2 seem to be somewhat equal, 30 each or 5% one way or the other between those 2.
I don't disagree with you. I feel like we could do it in the moments remaining. In fact, you could take 4 minutes, 3 minutes. Okay, let's try that and see where we come out. The clock is ticking.
I don't have a number to throw out, so I'll leave that to you. But yes, I would second that the site considerations phase 1 is numero uno. Yes, that should be the highest, in my opinion.
If we start with Joe's suggestion, does anyone disagree if we just do 40, 30, 30?
No, we're giving them a moment to think about this.
Oh.
It's quiet time. Okay. Put down your pencils. I love it. I've never gotten to say that to anybody before. Michael, are you calculating or checking your email? That's the question.
It's great.
I figured you've already picked yours out. Okay. I need a sheet here. Okay. We're gonna go in order top to bottom. So site considerations, concept, developer. And we're gonna start with Mallory, site, concept, developer. I'm just gonna write these down. Okay, Mallory?
45.
45?
40.
40.
Oh, for site.
Actually, I was gonna say, give me all
Say
three.
we're going
Oh,
all
Give us
sorry.
three-
Okay,
Yeah, give us
I'm
all
sorry.
three at once. We'll expedite this process.
Okay, 45, 30, 25.
Okay. Emma, thank
That's
you.
me. 40, 25, 35.
Okay.
45, 30, 25.
We're working in a narrow range so far. Kent?
40, 30, 30.
Michelle?
40, 30, 30.
40, 30, 30? You're not actually members of the committee, so we'll come back to you later. Taylor?
40, 30, 30.
40, 30, 30.
Oh, my goodness. Claire?
45, 30, 25.
And Joe?
10? No, I'm just kidding. 40, 30, 30.
I had 40, 35, 25.
And the mayor had a 40, 30, 30.
Oh, the mayor's here. Hey, hi, Mayor. Did you say 40, 30, 30?
Yep, try to make it simple.
Okay.
I'll do this one, Claire do that one.
You do the last one.
And understand your chicken scratch?
I was going to do it in my head, but I suppose I shouldn't.
If we have a half hour, I'll do it for you.
I do believe, so I said 25 for the second section. I do believe it's the one we have the most clarification on. Will provide the most amount of input in the second round, which was my decision on 25. Just as I think I put the lowest number on that. And I think the team who we select is very important in the first round, in addition to the site considerations. So I think our minimums are helpful, provide great guidance, and that we will discover more in the second session.
Yeah.
Charlie, one other thing maybe for us to think about is once we do this, a kind of Q&A after we send this out and get questions before the proposal, we may want to see if what we're hearing from the developers changes these percentages any.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the totals are, for number one, the average is 41.3. For number two, so that site considerations 41.3. Concept plan is 27.7, and the development team is 29.5. The preponderance of people went 40, 30, 30, if you want to look at it that way. I don't think we're going to do like 41.3, so. I'd be inclined to say I'm fine with 40, 30, 30. My idea was 40, 35, 25. Because I stick to my guns on this, I think it's pretty easy to weed out bad developers if we get any. And I'm not saying we would, but I'm okay with 40, 30, 30. Should we have a vote on that? We've never had a vote in this committee yet. Anybody want to make a motion, 40, 30, 30? you know, with the potential that it could change after we get some feedback from developers later.
Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion.
Okay, thank you.
I'll
Somebody make a
second.
second. Okay, wait. Michelle, motion. Claire, second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Look at this, we got something done. Our meeting is over. That's great. Thanks, everybody. We'll okay, for the next meeting, look at Jim's, 5-point, pretty simple thing. I don't think we'll have to spend a lot of time on that unless somebody vehemently disagrees with it and wants 10 points. We could do this again, but then we'll start talking about how we want to apply those points to the different line items in each box.
So our homework for next week is weighing each line item.
Yeah, your homework is to think ahead, so we'll come to the meeting prepared with our own ideas of how to do this. Maybe we'll have more tallies.
Is this something that I really appreciate the poll that we did last time. I thought it was helpful for going through pre-planning and then additionally seeing kind of where we all weigh
Yeah.
together would be helpful if we were able to send that out again. I thought it was a great item.
I'll modify this, send it out again. I'll be right with you, Michelle. Yes, but yes, it'd be great if you came with, plans. That'd be good. If not, we'll talk through it. Yes, ma'am.
And we added management considerations as a line item to the first box, correct? Okay. Sure.
No, I thought we were gonna put that up on the top as part of the.
Just pointed this to here.
Yeah, but then I put it up here, sorry. I think it should go in the top box, because it goes with either that or you move the need for incentives down. I feel it ties to that. That's where I'm gonna put it. We can debate that again next week. We didn't necessarily vote on that. Okay. All right, thanks, everybody. Good meeting. Next week, we're back to 1 PM. Kimber, we here? Yes. Okay, we'll be back here at 1 PM next Friday. Thanks, everybody.